with Sistah Sci-Fi, and this is Sistah Sci-Fi Wind Down Wednesday, where we work hard to make Wednesday your new favorite day of the week. So if you are on our email list, and if you are actively following us on socials, you know that today's guest is Justin C. Key, author at The Hospital at the End of the World and the short story collection. I'm looking to see if I have copies of The World Wasn't Ready for You Yet. I'm not currently in stock, but I will get in stock. And if you're wondering, The Hospital at the End of the World is a far future. Yeah, it's more far future. Not quite dystopia where AI and big corp have taken over all aspects of healthcare. Yeah, except for this one medical school in New Orleans, which is the last medical school in the world, or at least presumably the country, that is not providing healthcare completely through AI and big tech and big corp. And we see what happens in the book. The science is amazing, and it helps that Justin C. Key is actually a medical doctor. So I'll ask questions about his research in that. I'm excited to hear your questions. I'm excited to discuss the book with Justin C. Key. The name should sound familiar. We've done virtual events with Justin C. Key in the past, virtual and I think in person, but it's one of those days where I can't remember a gosh darn thing. So, while we wait for Justin C. Key, please let us know how your week has been, how your day has been in the chat. My day has been good. It's been really productive. As some of y'all know, I do a lot of things out here in these literary streets. So my week has been good. And I'm really excited. So I think the last half of the year, there weren't a lot of in-person Sistah Sci-Fi events. So planning and coordinating some in-person events. I'm very, very, very excited about that, including some celebrating some authors that you may know. Hey, so this is where all the people are. I was like, where are all the people? Okay, Justin, so I see you. So I will send you a request. And then we will go live. Yay!
Hello.
Hey, how you feeling?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm good. I am really good. How's your Wednesday been so far?
Been good. It's been good. Wednesdays is my patient's day, one of my patient's day. So saw a good amount of patients today. But yeah, no complaints. No complaints. It's I just finished up.
Yay. Well, I'm happy. Hopefully it was an easy and smooth transition for you to be
Yeah.
here today. As always, it's a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for experimenting with Instagram Live with me.
Oh yeah.
So before we get into discussing the book, The Hospital at the End of the World by Justin C. Key, and if you want to learn more, I will drop the link to learn more in the chat. I can do this. Yay. So the information to learn more is in the chat. But before we start diving into the book, please introduce yourself. I love self-introductions. They're more fun, in my humble opinion.
Okay, so I am Justin C. Key, and I am an author and a psychiatrist. I say that in that order because I was writing before I went to med school. I've been writing throughout this journey, but I am a practicing psychiatrist. So I do that, full time. But I've been writing since, for almost 20 years now, seriously. Science fiction, horror, fantasy. I published short stories professionally for the last like 10 or 12 years or so. Went to Clarion West in 2015, and that was kind of my entry into my big entry into like the science fiction and fantasy community. Have some stories in Tor.com and the magazine Fantasy and Science Fiction, Strange Horizons, Escape Pod. And then my first novel, science fiction novel, just came out from HarperCollins just a few weeks ago. I'm also a father of three. My oldest just turned 12 yesterday, and he likes to remind me how old I am now. And I've been married for 15 years this year. So, so yes, that's a little bit about me. I'm from DC, Washington, DC, but I live in Los Angeles now. So yeah, that's a little bit of my background.
You stay busy.
Just a little
And,
bit.
and yeah, and I don't write, but I was like, you're like a psychiatrist, you got three kids, and you find time to write. So I'm like, I love this for you. I love this. I love that for you. So that's amazing. Um, so my first question is, you talked about that you're a psychiatrist, which means you're a medical doctor. POC is at the start of the book, literally getting their decision letters. So it makes one wonder, makes a reader wonder how much of Pac's story is inspired by your own story.
Yeah, some of his experiences in medical school, especially like those first year classes, like with anatomy, and I think the anxiety that comes with wanting to do well, and especially in those group settings where like your grade is dependent on how the group does, definitely tapped into my experience going through medical school. I didn't, a lot of the other stuff, was fictional in terms of, him being growing up in New York and having like a father physician. I didn't really have a relationship with my father, so that was more of like tapping into my relationship with my son, and kind of like that hopeful of the type of father I would be to like a grown son. So those were more hopeful bits. And then, I think that the spirit of kind of going through medicine and learning medicine and knowing that, one of the things, the big thing that drew me to medicine was that, human interaction. So those are instilled in
Mhm.
Pac. He definitely has a lot more hair than I have, than I ever have, have had. But yeah, definitely when, walking through those halls of medical school and the hospital, tapped into like some of my early experiences.
This is not a question, so I am deviating. Um, Puck and um, several other characters have lots of hair. Particularly, I loved it personally, like a lot of long flowing locks, and I was like, Justin is bald. And I was like, Justin Jr. have locks. Like I was like, I'm here for all the locks. So like, what did these characters? So many of the characters having locks. What did that symbolize for you? Especially, there's one scene where somebody's like, "You go into medical school, you need to conform, conform, conform. You need to
Yeah.
cut off all your hair." And I remember it wasn't going intimate, but like I went to business school and like there was like interviewing for jobs and people were like, it's time to like cut your hair or get oppressed and all that kind of stuff. So what did having so many characters with locks in the hospital at the end of the world mean for you?
Yeah, even though I've been bald since the pandemic, I know how important and varied, hair is to the black community. I grew up, I never had locks. I did it for one small portion of my middle school career. I had cornrows. But even remember like having like relatively short hair, like doing the wave cap, trying to kind of get it perfectly, having that line like going around here, hair and what we do with hair, it was definitely a big part of growing up. My wife and a lot of people that in my family or the friends and family have locks, and seeing like the care that they put towards it. And then also knowing as I was going through the process of applying for medical school, really thinking about, okay, got to be more conservative looking, and I did. I just had the most generic, like low cut haircut that you could think of. And I wonder now, like if I did have a lot of hair, like, and would I change it for my medical school interviews? And I do think that, unfortunately, going into something that is as conservative as medicine, you don't want to, you know, um, you don't want anything to work against you. It's already like going through. I remember I was interviewing with somebody at Columbia Medical School, and it was going great. And then halfway through, she was like, I don't know why they didn't hook you up with like one of the diversity people. You maybe have much more to talk about. And I was like, I thought we were doing fine. We've been talking about my interest in medicine. Like the conversation was going well. So I do think there's already like things that they're already going to have like these like preconceived notions or what have you. So that was definitely rooted in that. And then seeing people navigate that through medical school, seeing people who did have locks and then, would cut it all off and then they'd grow it back in residency and then finally being able to kind of, I think, be themselves. And then where it led to in the book was just kind of thinking about the nuance that we have as a community with like our hair, what it means, and I can really see an AI system like being able to tell you, like if you asked it, like this is what it means, but to actually recognize that meaning. So I thought it was one of those things where something that we do very easily, the AI system is still baffled by.
There are other questions that I want to ask about AI, but first I want to talk about this honey, which is weird. It's like a weird question to ask, but like one of the inheritance that Pot gets for his father is like this carver honey, which is pharmaceutical grade. And when I was reading, I was like, oh, like, I think about doctors and prescribing pharmaceuticals, and then like the rest of the world who did not go to medical school trying to find more homeopathic recipes.
Yeah.
How often do you feel like you get to use homeopathic recipes in the way that Pock did in the book in your own practice?
So it's definitely not my expertise. So I think that like being included in the book is kind of almost that like wishful thinking. There's a lot of things, for example, that I wish I had the ability to do. Like and a lot of it I can learn. But for example, like EMDR, I've heard of that type of therapy. I wish I could kind of matrix download it into my brain so that I can do it. But I definitely encourage patients to seek that out otherwise. So it's not something that I what's the opposite of condone? It's not something that I criticize or, and I encourage if a patient is doing that and I'll work with them to make sure that anything that they're taking, whether independently or from like another provider doesn't interfere like negatively with what I'm prescribing. But I work with them in that way, but I don't prescribe it or I'm not able to myself. And mainly because the medical license, right? Like I have to make sure that the things that I prescribe is kind of has been vetted by like the medical community. So I'll tell patients that I'm like um, I can't formally recommend that, right? Especially since that type of treatment there could be I don't know where you're getting it from, I don't know the quality of it. I can't recommend that. But if you are going to go that route, just making sure that you are with somebody that you trust, you know where you're getting it from, et cetera. Let me know what you're taking so we kind of work together with that. So that's a long way of saying no, but it's just not my expertise.
And I mean, that's the great thing about science fiction is that you can explore possibilities that are not currently everyday or mainstay, right? And begin
Yeah.
to create that future. For those of you who have just joined, we are in discussion with Justin C. Key. We're discussing their first novel, The Hospital at the End of the World. And I'm redropping the link in the chat so you can get more information if you want to learn more about the book. So many ways to go from that. But I'm going to go to this one because it kind of tags onto something you said earlier. Pock's father isn't perfect, right? But the love and intimacy between Pock and his father seems perfect. How did it feel writing such emotionally whole black men characters?
Yeah, I think that it's part of one of the things why I write is to, fix some of the things that are wrong in the world, like that are wrong with my experience, and I do that both through writing and just my own family. So, I really, I don't have like a relationship with my father, but I have three kids, two of them, the two oldest are boys, and then the youngest is girls, so 12, 10, just turned to 12, 10, and 5. And even like subconsciously, I just notice a lot of the stories that I write deal with that father son relationship. And I think that me processing like what it is that I was missing and what it is that I want for my kids. And then I think it really actually comes, I think, naturally on the page. Just, not to be kind of, what's it called, cliche about it, but from like the love that I have for my kids, I think I'm able to really, I think, tap into that. And then just also show the type of relationship I strive for. And also recognizing, like you said, like I'm not perfect. There's definitely times I think I apologize to my son this morning, for, like, one of my reactions to just the chaos of trying to get three kids ready for school or what have you. But then being able to do that, versus maybe like some of the more like old school or maybe even still prevalent today is, parents are always right and not apologizing to your child or your son and not telling them you love them or not showing affection, all those things. So as much as I tackle it in my writing, I try to tackle it in my household. So it's been very good to be able to do that on the page and then see that it resonates with people. That's been cool.
Yeah, it definitely resonated with me. But if you're like, oh, I prefer books with, family drama, there's a lot of that in there too. So read
Yeah,
it for the tea.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but stepping away from the drama, I loved, this is also not in the question list. And you may be like, why she sent me the question list if she's not
No,
here.
no, it's fine.
Sorry. I loved not only the like reading the practice of like essence between
Yeah,
doctor and
yeah,
patient and like kind of like beyond, but also like you have a segment where it's like this was the experiments to prove like the essence is not just the placebo effect, right? Like what inspired that? Like was there research that went into that? Was that also kind of more like putting into words the kind of practice that you wish to see? Because I loved reading about like this doctor patient influence that was more than just diagnosis.
yeah. One of my big or my life's like wonders about is consciousness and just what it is that we experience, and it's still we know so little about it. And I think that it could be that consciousness is an aspect of the universe, just like gravity is or other forces, right? We just haven't been able to discover it yet. And then I think about like stuff like dark matter, where I'm not an expert on it, but we can't point to it, but we know it exists and it's in the equations. We are like, this exists, we just don't know where it is, and we can't really explain it to you. So with those bases, I was thinking that, oh, it would be cool if there actually was like some aspect of the universe that was informing like what we see in the placebo effect, right? Like that informs that there is some inherent value in the relationships, when you're prescribing medications or when you're doing a variety of different things. So that was kind of the scientific basis in terms of, okay, if this exists, we have this consciousness that we all experience, and we don't know how it works almost at all. And then thinking of dark matter, then I was like, okay, it's not too much of a stretch to say that something like the essence exists. And then knowing that the placebo effect has definitely been studied and shown, and recognized, and there's even more of a push to understand that the placebo effect shouldn't just be dismissed. Because actually, and there's a lot of controversy about, like, I think antidepressants and how helpful they actually are. But one of the criticisms of them is that actually they don't work that much better than placebo. But there's been a push to show that like that narrative is dismissive of what the placebo does, and the that part of the placebo effect is like a patient meeting with a doctor and aligning with them and trusting them and what have you. And that's a very real aspect. I definitely get a lot of patients who may have tried something for depression or anxiety with their primary care doctor initially, and it might be a much shorter appointment, or just after they like filled out a questionnaire, and then I will start the same medication in somebody else starting from scratch, and I see that it has a much bigger effect, and sometimes a lot earlier than I actually would physiologically suspect. And I think that's because, somebody's feeling heard, they're feeling like, that there's a buy-in into like that this could really be helpful versus like, oh, you screen positive for depression, try this out. Right.
Right.
So I think that that's very tangible. And I wanted to by making it rooted in like, oh, we're able to identify this in the universe, then I'm able to kind of do more with it in that science fiction space.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that grounding of like we had there was an experiment that's why this university is thinking like really rooted in teaching the essence, right? So that
Yeah.
was it was exciting for me as a reader. Um, moving on to why the university that Bob goes to is so important is that the novel asks the question, what happens when we outsource healthcare to machines? And what do we lose when AI becomes our primary healthcare provider? So, what do you think we lose when AI becomes our primary healthcare provider?
Yeah, I do think that there is something inherently valuable about. So there's a lot of different things, like technically, but I think there's something inherently valuable about that human connection and like having that partnership and almost that buy-in. So I think an easy example, maybe like you hear about people getting therapy from like ChatGPT. And it's hard to criticize on the individual level because our healthcare system may have left it so that person is not able to see like an actual therapist, or maybe not able to get in because of lack of availability or what have you. But I do think that even if there's benefit in the beginning or there's some insights, I do think that a part of the benefit of therapy is sitting with another person and being recognized and heard by another person. I think of it in the same way that I think of sports, right? Like, would we tune in to an Olympics where all of the contestants are robots? It's
Mm.
like no, even though they could do things much better than humans. If you think of a basketball game, they might be able to put Steph Curry to shame and shoot 100%. But the what intrigues us is that somebody like us, somebody flawed like us, is doing these things, and I do think that there's benefit in knowing that like somebody who has like that basic shared experience is walking with us in this journey of medicine. So that's one thing. And then I do think what's lost is that human intuition and that human decision making, and also recognizing that there are some things, there are some data points, there are some considerations that we may actively as humans put aside, right? Like if you have an algorithm or have you, one thing that I fear is, okay, if that algorithm either has access to or is part of a company that, owns the hospital, owns the insurance, owns the prescriber, owns the physical therapy, the treatment, or what have you, then how much information is going to be put into the care of that patient and making a decision for the care of that patient? Is it for the best interest of the patient, or does it start bringing in like calculations of the bottom line, right? And I think being able to have like that one-on-one, knowing in that moment that like that human doctor is trying to do what's in the best interest of that patient, I think you lose that when you have an AI system that's thinking about all the studies and all the data and what have you. So I do think that replacing it is the wrong move. Whereas I think that where the power could be is informing the physician, like being used as a tool, right? Like where, I can get like data or insights so that if it's looking at their whole history or what have you, some things that the patient may not be able to remember, I could then have in that system like, oh, you did try this medication 20 years ago and it had this effect. And based on, your blood markers here and based on, your genetics or what have you, this is all saying that, this may be the best next step. But I don't, then here's the but I don't think that's right for you right now because of these considerations. Or, recognizing that, yes, you said that a loved one or a friend had a bad reaction to that medication. So I have to take that into account, you know. and know when to, push a little bit harder on that. Like a lot of times, like if a patient comes and that they have a medication in mind that's definitely in the range of what I would prescribe, that buy-in is important. And, I'd be like, and I will prescribe that for them, versus if there are times when it's like, yeah, this is really like not the right one, or if I think it's, dangerous not to go a certain route. I know
Mhm.
just from my experience with people which way to push or which way to go. And I think that, that AI is going to be, I think, too cold and disconnected from that human experience to be able to do that nuance.
Mm. Yes, that makes sense. I'm going to switch away from like maybe the science of it to the heart of it. And I think the biggest thing that's emblematic of that is the setting, like the hospital at the end of the world being in New Orleans, right? Within the state of Louisiana, which has decided like we are going to be an AI free state. So the question becomes, why New Orleans? And the decision of like that type of regulation being possible at the state level, what inspired that? So those two questions.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm not from New Orleans, one of my best friends is from New Orleans, and it has been imprinted on me for better or for worse at kind of pivotal times in my life and my creative journey. I remember Hurricane Katrina happened as I was entering college, and one of the first, programs I went to was put on by my now like good friend, where he was raising money for families that had been displaced. So, and I was 18 at the time. So, seeing what's happening with the news coverage of it, and, and the narrative of it, and really like something happening where it feels like that America is kind of, as a whole, like turned its back on a city. And then from a narrative perspective, one of the stories that I read, one book that I read was Fever Dream by George R. R. Martin, and it's set in antebellum New Orleans. So I was really interested. I was really fascinated by kind of what he did with the setting, and then being able to visit it, for my good friend's wedding, and just at other times, I can just seeing like the rich culture there, just seeing the difference from there from like the rest of the country, still with like the architecture, etc. And it has a medical community. It has multiple medical schools there. And so I thought it was just a right place to be able to explore like the culture of, a 20-year step in the future. If they're rejecting of technology, then I think they are leaning more on that individuality in culture. They have the medicine there, they have the institutions there. And then thinking as other things that are going to affect the future, like with climate change, I do think that they're right to say, okay, the country is going this in this direction, and it's not in our best interest. So we're going to do things differently, and then being at odds with the country because of that. And then the wheels start turning of like, what do the rest of the country think of this? Like, what information are they getting? Like, how does the media kind of control the narrative? And you see that with Pac. Like like in the beginning, having grown up in New York, he just sees it as this like backwards state or city that's really digging its own grave. And then when he goes there, he sees that it's almost like the opposite of that. They've been wary of like the technology for a reason, and they've kind of made their own way. So that's a lot of the kind of the background, and then by writing it and just making sure that I get like the different aspects correct, it was really fun to have it in that setting.
No, I loved it. I love that it was in New Orleans. New Orleans, I've never been, but there's like a cultural richness and
Yeah.
spirituality. Just like there's a whole legacy of New Orleans that makes it very American, but also very foreign at the same time. So it's
Yeah.
like this feels like the right setting. Speaking of historical influences, the book talks about like has some instances of medical experimentation. There's a rich history of medical rich is probably not the right adjective, but there's a history of medical experimentation in African American communities. So, were there any real life historical events that inspired some of those aspects of the book?
Yeah, it's somewhere here on my shelf, but Medical Apartheid by like I think it's Harriet Washington. I may be I'm saying it soft just in case I'm getting it wrong. But I read that very early on, like maybe like 10 years ago now, in terms of researching the ideas for this book. I mean, there's classically, I think the Tuskegee, and then there's Marion Sims, like the quote unquote father of gynecology, which a lot of the advancements in gynecological surgery were done on slaves that can't consent. And then so thinking about like how where are the advancements, on which backs are we doing the advancements, and then who gets the benefit from it.
Right.
And not to be too critical of the system, because I don't know, I'm not as much of a expert on the ins and outs and what the benefits are. But when I was in going through medical school, I did Mount Sinai, New York. Part of the rotations was at a community hospital, right? And then seeing like the difference in it being a teaching hospital, seeing the difference in how readily like uh, student doctors were asked to come in to observe versus like in the private settings, how it may be more of like, okay, we need to make sure that they're fine with it. We need to make sure they're okay. I remember, I think, early on, during like a birth, they asked the doctor asking if the medical student could, me could deliver the baby, and I think it was like a Spanish speaking woman. And I remember not, I was like, does she know? And I think that I could see that it was almost like a, she might have not felt like she was in a position even to kind of like push back. Whereas like when I was in a clinic in like a richer part of the city, it was very much like, let me go in, talk to them first, see if they want any medical students in. So I remember just really seeing that dichotomy, recognizing that it's important that, physicians are, the next generation of physicians get that training, get that hands on, and also recognizing that like teaching hospitals are actually some of the places where you can get the best care because of all the different levels of people that you have eyes on the patient. But then just seeing how that's kind of rooted in, okay, which are the populations that we can most easily, I think, like advance technology on, and then who benefits from it later, once it goes, and if there's something new, once it goes and it costs more, etc., like who are going to be able to have access to that. So yeah, so all of that informed the book as I was writing it.
No, thank you for that. So, for those of you who are curious, I dropped the link to Medical Apartheid to Mahogany Books online store so you can learn more about that. Also, you can check it out from your local library. If they don't have it, you can request it. Um, so, that talks about your research for the historical incidents that may have informed the book. My next question is like, there's a lot of science and research and projection about like the future of medicine that we kind of hinted upon earlier. What research did you have to do for that? Or was it like, look, I went to medical school, I was a resident, I know this, right?
Yeah, yeah. To be honest, it was more along those lines. I joke. I might jokingly tell people that like this was, my I the research was already kind of done in a lot because I went through that. So a lot of that is like seeing like the advancements in technology that we already have, and then thinking, okay, what are the step further may be, like what directions it may go. But being in medicine and being in the hospital, like definitely seeing like the cutting edge of things, and seeing as like new things are implemented and how they're, what problems they may cause or what benefits they may have. I think they're really, I'm trying to think if there's any specific example, but I think when I get to something or a topic where I'm like, okay, I don't know too much about, I'm not an expert on this or what have you, I might quickly just kind of either review like the literature, or like what's the latest on it. Or to be honest, I have like going through medical school and residency, I have a lot of connections with different doctors in different fields, so I may just pick their brains about it. I will say, yeah, I'm a practicing psychiatrist and an outpatient psychiatrist. So even though I started the idea for the story when I was like a first year medical school, a first year medical student, it's been like almost like a bell curve that, like, there was a certain time where I really was in the hospital, like really exposed to kind of like what inpatient medicine is like, and now I'm getting further and further away, where it's been, I was watching The Pit recently, and it reminds me of my time like being like a emergency medicine intern, like when we were rotating. But that was what, like 8 years ago now. Right. So if I was writing some of this, which I was writing some of those scenes like close to that, then I'm really able to kind of really tap into like the setting and the feel. And now I might have to go back and kind of remind myself, it's like, oh, this is how it's done. But I will say that the groundwork for it is that it does a lot of the research is already kind of baked in.
Right, right. So your previous work, you talked about your short story collection, your short story submissions. We mentioned the short story collection earlier. Often blends like psychological and ease with speculative elements. How is writing The Hospital at the End of the World different and or the same?
Yeah, so one of the main differences between short stories and a novel for me is scope. Um, I know it's not exact, but I'd say like the difference between the first draft of a 5,000 word short story and like 100,000 word novel would be just 20 times the time, because my process for that is fairly like the same. I'm kind of like it's called like a pantser. I don't outline. I write by the seat of my pants, and then it's that revision and bringing out the themes. That's where there's a big difference. Where that 5,000 word short story, there's not much there in terms of that need. If I decide that the theme is going to be different, it's probably one theme and it's a couple characters, and I can switch them around or what have you. And that revision and even getting people to read it, like I can send somebody 5,000 word short story, and sometimes I get like feedback the same day, depending, but to get like revisions or eyes on a novel, it can take months or what have you. So, and then the changes that you may make, have cascading and ripple effects. The changes that I end up making on chapter 3, then I need to make sure that it's consistent with chapter 20 or chapter 40 or chapter 60. But the benefit really has been exploring like a vaster cast of characters in different settings, and to be honest, like in talking about it with people now, a cool part is being reminded of like different aspects that are in the book. Like people be like, oh, I really, I like this aspect or what have you, and I'm like, oh, I totally forgot that I did. That was a
You did
significant
do
part.
that.
Somebody might have said something about like, oh, the riding the rails part. I was like, oh, I did, do a
Drifting,
whole,
yeah,
yeah,
which
yeah,
I was like, I mean, I guess you got to get from New York to New York somehow, and you can't
yeah,
walk, especially if you
yeah.
twisted your ankle. But I was very definitely petrified. But yes,
Yeah, yes. So it's the scope mainly. That's been the difference. And novels have been, thankfully, I it hasn't been too bad of a transition, because you know I read Stephen King's on writing in 2007. He said the first million words of practice, and he says that he writes like his first draft in like 3 months. He puts it aside and writes something else, and then he comes back. So that's what I did. I wrote like a novel, my first one, that's sitting up here somewhere, printed out. Like in 3 months, I put it aside and wrote another one. And then so I had already had some practice, or at least let myself know, had proved to myself that I can write these long forms, even though I had spent years like focusing on short fiction. So it wasn't like going into completely new territory. It was almost kind of like coming back to old territory, but having leveled up. If I make
oh no, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. So that leads to my next question, or at least it does in my mind. Ashley is very impressed by your answer. What
like
books would you say The Hospital at the End of the World is in conversation with? Um, yeah, I'm excited to hear what you say.
Yeah, yeah. So, one, SB Divya's Machine Hood, and in that, the robots or AI at odds with humanity, but the thing they're at odds with is capitalism. In terms of robots being able to do things better than humans, and really trying to kind of fight against them. To make a living. I think that's very and much like in line with like what we're seeing like happening today. But my novel is about like that autonomy, like us being at odds with like what is actually the best route for care. And I think it's more of a nuance, because I think on its surface it's like, oh, well, yeah, it's a no-brainer to have like a perfect algorithm system that can know all about us and know all our history and know all the studies or what have you to make these medical decisions. But then it's like, okay, but what are the inherent benefits of like that human to human interaction? And then, I was thinking of this, and I was thinking about if this answer came up so naturally, and then I was trying to think of like, okay, but how? But the Reformatory by Tana Reeve do,
Oh,
and I think that,
okay. I'm interested in the answer. Okay.
yeah, so so that really resonated with me in terms of like my family's from Southern Virginia, and I can trace our roots back to a plantation that was in Virginia, and just knowing like what my family went through going through Jim Crow, and the exploring of the past, and mine is the exploring of the future. So the knowledge of kind of like where we've come from, it informs the fears and the hopes and the warnings of where we're going to go. So I think that it's like two sides of the coin, and I want it to resonate with readers in that same way. Thinking of the past and in an entertaining way. It's a horror novel, right? Mine is a sci-fi thriller, but seeing the horrors of the past, being able to see how they're still present in the present, and that being as a warning for like where we're going forward. I think is in the same way when talking about the future, right? Then you can see like some of the things that are happening now, and you recognize it, and then they're both warnings. So I think that so yeah, so I'd say those two books.
Okay. Okay. I like that. I was for me, my I love those. Machine Hood seems beautiful, and I was like, I'm glad it's in my radar. And the Reformatory, yeah, I cried a lot. For me, there are a lot of similar themes to The Hospital at the End of the World and Sky Full of Elephants. I think that the whole like you had a state which everybody was talking smack about but was moving differently and was
Yeah.
using technology differently. Yours was Louisiana and his was Alabama, so that's one. And I feel like there was another book in my head and it's gone, but that was the one that came up the most. So but I love your books and conversation, and your answer is the one that matters most. So so oh, you really went through this answers. I think we started a bit early, and this or that usually takes about 10 minutes. And like typically we should end at 5:50, but I'm always running late. Anyway, this is a time when you get to read an excerpt.
Okay.
Um, yes. So yeah, please read us an excerpt. Let us know what page you're reading from so we can follow along with you. So for those of you who just joined, we're discussing The Hospital at the End of the World with Justin C. Key. He just answered books that The Hospital at the End of the World is in conversation with. I dropped links for both books in the chat in case you want to learn more.
Okay, cool. So I am reading from page 9. So it's the beginning of chapter 2, and it's close to the bottom of the page. And just as a background, basically to kind of orient you, our main character Pac. He's about 20. He's grown up in New York. He is a medical school hopeful applicant. Has just gotten rejected by all the top medical schools in the country, and all the top medical schools have recently been bought by the Shepherd organization, which is this like global AI corporation, and Pac lives in New York with his physician father, and a patient has just rang the doorbell for his father. Uh, so the doorbell chimed. Philando checked the time, unrolled his sleeves to cover his sinus rhythm forearm tattoo, and tucked in his shirt. Come see this patient with me. Tell me what you noticed. Humor an old man. Afterward, we'll talk. A short woman with long, thick braids and an ankle length winter coat stepped into their apartment. Layered atop apparent angst was a cordial, hopeful smile. She moved with a deliberate silence. Philando took her lead. 2 years ago, he had started his own part time private practice as an addendum to his clinical work at MacArthur. Considered a holistic practitioner, Philando worked nearly exclusively without AI input. His clientele had grown significantly since its inception. His patients consistently surprised Pac in their narrow view of technology, the paranoia, the resistance to clear clinical judgment, the gross misunderstanding. The assumption, for example, that they could somehow hide from Shepard data mining. No one could hide, not even experienced hackers. They made their way past the living room, down the hall, into his father's examination room. Tell me what you notice. The woman's hair was full and healthy, shaved in a stylish fade on one side. Her coat housed a full figure. Such long, thick dress at the height of summer. Sunglasses, despite the poorly lit hallway. What was she hiding? Philando flicked on the two miniature EMP boxes flanking his office doorway. Pocket made the disruptors out of old radio parts to give Philando's patients privacy. At best, it was a technological placebo. Device-free zone, Philando said once they were all inside. You can speak freely. Philando helped her out of her coat. Sweat marked her armpits. She was very pregnant. Pac, meet Florence. Florence, this is my son, and he's also a future medical student. Pac winced at the introduction. Can he join us? Of course, that's wonderful. Following in his dad's footsteps. You must be proud. Florence slid backward into the exam chair, breathed deep, and lifted her shirt just enough to give air to her sweat-slicked stomach. She rubbed it with a mother's tenderness. It's okay, baby girl. We can both breathe. What is it now? Philando said. 35, 36 weeks? 37, Florence said. She closed her eyes, restful calm edging out her angst. In 3 days. Due any day now. How are you? Florence continued to rub her belly. Baby girl is doing well. She kicks a lot and likes cuddling up on this side. That's wonderful. But how are you? She half laughed, nervous, wondering if baby girl is positioning right. Let's have a look. Philando rolled a stand over with an old-style computer, keyboard, and a corded probe. He turned the monitor on, squeezed blue gel from a bottle onto Florence's exposed stomach, and spread it with the probe, repositioning the cord as it spiraled into itself. Then he pressed perpendicular to the base of her belly. On the display, various shades of gray rolled in non-specific lines. There we go. Pac edged closer. Shepherd apps created fully rendered fetal models starting at 4 weeks gestation, making ultrasounds like this one essentially obsolete. Philando steadied the probe. A crude slice of the baby's head floated onto the screen. There's my baby girl, Florence said. She's active today. Philando found her heartbeat. He went through baby girl's anatomy, pointing out her arms, legs, feet, cross-section of the head, spine, and various organs. Using the keyboard spacebar as a marker, he measured each with the probe. Philando put the ultrasound aside, changed out his gloves, and pressed against the different sides of her belly. Can my son feel? Of course. Pac admired his father. He was, after all, the original reason Pac wanted to become a doctor. His calm, empathetic confidence set patients at ease in a way no AI system could. But the more Pac learned about the advancements in medicine and the wonders of Shepherd AI, the more he saw his father's humanistic approach for what it was, grossly inefficient. In the time it had taken Florence to remove her coat, Shepherd programming would have mapped baby girl's anatomy, biomarkers, brain activity, and gestational age and analyzed it against all of the mother's metrics to pinpoint the exact area of focus. The hospital saw it too. Pock suspected there were multiple reasons his father spent more and more of his time seeing private practice patients. Pock stepped forward. Philando guided his hand. Florence's belly was surprisingly tight. Philando moved their collective touch over a distinct bulge along her left side. Baby girl pushed against Pock's fingers. That's her spine. Here's her head. Philando hung his stethoscope around his neck and gently gestured for his son to step back. He placed a hand on Florence's shoulder. She's breech again, isn't she? She is, Philando said. You can do another maneuver? I can, but baby girl might turn right back. Why does it keep happening? Sometimes mother and child can be out of alignment. Philando held up a hand. That doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. There are many reasons the external environment can be at odds with the internal, and baby girl is just reflecting that. It has to do with the essence, right? Florence said. Sort of, Philando said. The essence is more about the doctor-patient relationship, though I imagine it could apply to a mother-daughter connection. Pock routinely felt a mix of doubt and wonder whenever his father talked of the essence with his patients. The idea of some inherent quality of human interaction impacting physiology was too abstract. Despite promising studies in peer-reviewed journals, Philando himself, first author on the most important of them, critics boiled it down to a glorified placebo effect. Sadly, the more Pock learned, the more he agreed. AI-led recommendations weren't perfect, but with time, technology would atone for whatever benefits came from seeing a human doctor. Speaking of the essence imbalance, there's something I think might help. Philando pushed his chair back, rummaged in the cabinet beneath the sink, and took out an old capped glass jar half full of emerald-colored gelatin. Something I've held on to since fellowship. Honey? Florence and Pock said together. Not just any honey, carved bee honey. You remember carved bees? The honey, once digested, circulates in the blood and binds to high oxidation states. It wipes out viruses, bacteria, stress hormones, toxins, you name it. Philando unscrewed the jar. Pock anticipated a sour smell of fermentation older than him, but instead a sweet aroma floated through the office. Philando scooped some into a smaller jar. Take a spoonful in the morning and before bed. It'll help prevent any infections if you go into labor early. Philando performed the external cephalic version, reassured Florence of the plan, and, after she had redonned her disguise, led her out the front door. And I'm skipping forward just like a half page to where they're going. So a little bit down 13. There's an app that does all this, Pock said. Philando half smiled. He'd been expecting the rebuttal. It auto-adjusts throughout the pregnancy so breach never happens. Florence doesn't trust tech. I can't really blame her. The shepherd thinks she's only in her second trimester. Pock must have heard wrong. That doesn't make sense. Philando, smiling, twisted his stud earring. She gamed the system. She imitated normal range daily temperatures and metrics before and for weeks after conception. The pregnancy didn't register until the beginning of the second trimester. Pock still didn't understand. Why would she hide it? The algorithm decided her last pregnancy should be terminated. Well, if it concluded that, there must be a good reason, Pock said. The Shepherd AI learned from the same biased practices that led to decades of bad outcomes for black pregnancies. A bias the AI fixed, Pock said. I've read the studies. The data doesn't lie. Some data can. I'd do the same if I'd been through what she has. Thank you, Sarah.
No, thank you for reading that scene because it does set up the book so wonderfully. And there are two times in the book where Pock says the data doesn't lie, and I'm like, sometimes data doesn't lie, but humans can twist conclusions,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
uh,
yeah. It's like who's in control of it?
right. So I love that. And it is the start of like several journeys that we see in the book. And I think the scene after that, we have this really beautiful scene of Philando doing Pock's hair, which is like, is something you usually see between mothers and daughters. So it's beautiful to see between Philando and Pock. Um, Okay, so we have about 5, 10 minutes remaining. We'll end with my second favorite part of the live. My first favorite part of the live is everything we've been doing this far. And the next segment is this or that. So with this or that, I'll give you two options and you respond rapid fire. If you're in the chat, you can give your answers well. You can drop it in the chat. I tried to make it in alignment with the themes of the book. We'll see how I did. Okay, any questions?
No, not for me.
Yeah. The first, this or that, medicine, art, or science?
Ugh. Do the other ones like be destroyed? I'd say art.
Art. Okay, because there's so much research in like biology and chemistry and
Yeah, I have a longer answer to that I'll say afterwards. But
okay, okay. I mean, now we can. Yeah, you said you've given your initial answer, so now
yeah,
we can
yeah.
discuss. Like, there's a little bit of a just delay. So yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I think that because people have said through the years, they might say like, oh, I don't do anything. I don't do something important like you, like referencing me as a doctor or like a lifesaver or what have you. And I think that you know the importance of saving a life is then what is that what's going to be in that life, right? And I do think that art and entertainment and all the different joys is what makes life worth living and makes it worth saving, right? And I think I remember early on seeing this blog from somebody who had like an end stage cancer diagnosis, and she was talking about how like she had found like fulfillment through all of the reading that she was doing. So I think that medicine and science, I think that it's hard to pick one, but I think that they're all important. But I think that one of the reasons that it is important is so that we can like be able to continue to do unique thing
Mm,
of humanities, which I think create art. And I think that that is one of the things that, outlast us too. So, that's my kind of long answer.
okay, I'm here for it. Actually, I always also agree with you that medicine is an art. So the next one is technology or intuition.
Uh, Intuition, because I think that technology without intuition is more dangerous than intuition without technology.
Uh, that's brilliant. That should be on a shirt. Yeah.
Oh, Tim, man,
Yeah, I was like, that's the end. I was like, yeah, that's yeah, that might be a little blurb before the next chapter in your that was brilliant. I love it. Um, truth or peace?
hmm. Peace. Yeah, because I mean, if I'm thinking, what's the point of truth if it leads to like harm?
Mm, mm.
Yeah, so I'm kind of thinking of these things as kind of putting against each other. So it's like you pick truth, that means that you without peace, meaning that the truth leads to harm. So yes, I'd say peace.
Huh. Because I was like, when I was like, oh no, it's definitely truth. Because, like, if you don't have truth, then your peace is manufactured. It's not real.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you
But no,
do
I
you
mean,
mean
like,
peace of mind, or like I guess I'm thinking of I was thinking of like War Drum's peace.
yeah, and I was,
Oh,
I
ah,
versus peace. And I think I
yeah,
meant
yeah,
more like peace of mind, like internal alignment, balance. And if that is made in like a castle of lies, then your
yeah.
peace is
I
hot.
will
But
say if
I
it's
like your
if
answer. Yeah.
I will say if it's peace of mind, I may pick I may pick truth just because, as a writer, if like this book was horrible, I would want to know, so that I can do better on the next one, and then that's how, that's how kind of for better for worse is how I operate. Like really quick, I remember at Clarion West, like one of my stories, somebody was like, "This is great, like it's I like it for this and the action." But the prose didn't really land for them, so I was like, so the next one I'm going to like level up my prose, and then I wrote like a beautiful story that people said was like a song. So I think that I want to know so that I can kind of, so I can do better.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I like that. The last this or that is data or wisdom.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's like I think it's like the technology or intuition part. I would say wisdom because I think wisdom implies that there is going to be an acknowledgement of where things are lacking. So I think that is going to be an acknowledgement that you're acting with lack of data. And I think that that is a better path than data without context to it. Because if you just have like stupid data, it's like, then you may not know you may not know what to do with it. It's like, oh, if the data is that, I don't know, this is a really bad example, but that like, radiation kills cancer cells, then, different people, somebody might go and be like, hey, let me just expose myself. And it's like, no,
No,
you know what I
no,
mean?
no.
So that's a very crude example, but I think that it's just an example of like, I think having the knowledge and the experience of how that data can be used. And I think that's something that wisdom can work without the data. It's not going to be perfect, but I think it'd be better.
It can be directional. Okay, I like that. Joey in SF Bay asked, is it too early to talk about the quote unquote next one? And I think I'm assuming he means the next book that you're writing. That's what
Yeah,
I'm going to take that to mean. Joey, let me know if I'm misunderstanding. Just drop it in the chat. So yeah, what are you working on? What's next?
completely too early. Next question. I'm just kidding. So yeah, I'm working. And I got a lot of it written. I'm working on a horror. It's a body horror actually. But it's still a science fiction crossover. And how do I explain it? So it deals with like quantum mechanics and like if you ever heard of like the Schrodinger's cat, like the idea that
Yeah.
like the different versions of the universe like exist, right? So that's the basis, and then it's a body horror because the main character is trapped in this thing where like in one universe she's dead, another universe she's live. So you can kind of imagine how the body horror comes up, and her best friend is the one who had killed her. So it's dealing also with psychopathy and how that manifests in women. And I thought that that was like more interesting to explore because I think that like psychopathy in men is very like cliche. Like all the serial killer movies are basically that. Like that's and it manifests different. In women, so being able to explore that has been fun and enlightening, and I love body horror, so I'm able to kind of to dip into that too. So that's what I'm working on now, and I actually have it due to my it sounds like I have it due to somebody upstairs, but no, I have it due to my critique group on April 1st.
Oh, I was like, oh, you're editing.
No, yeah,
Wait,
no,
wait,
no,
wait.
no. I'm still, so my next thing is like in terms of what it'll be up in the air. But I've talked to my agent about it, and he's excited about it. So my next step is just to polish up this draft, and then hopefully we can do something with it this year.
Okay, okay. That's exciting. Body horror is a hard genre for me, but I do love horror.
Yeah,
And I do have a thing for women serial killers. Like I enjoyed My Sister the Serial Killer. I was seeing like Honey came up on my theme, which is another woman serial killer. I watch Why Women Kill. I'm not a murderer. Like I'm
yeah,
definitely not a fighter, so I'm not gonna kill nobody. But horror about women serial killers is very exciting to me. So yeah, Joe is excited. Loves a good body horror. Is very grateful, and we answered his question spot on. So A plus all around.
yeah.
Um, Justin, thank you so much for joining the live. I truly enjoyed the hospital at the end of the world. Um, I love that it was in New Orleans. I love Pac's journey. I loved his relationship with his dad. Um, and ultimately, I loved the balanced and the nuanced discussion. Um, so thank you for sharing your talents with the world.
Well, thank you for for reading it and coming up with some such great questions, and then allow me to talk about it and share it with your audience. I'm so excited to have this out, and dream come true. So, thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. And yeah, well, like I don't know when I'll be in Worldcon, so I'll probably be in LA for Worldcon. So
Oh
hopefully I'll
yeah,
see
yeah,
you
I'll
there.
definitely be there. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Let's definitely. I'll definitely be there.
Okay. Awesome. 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 Talk soon.
All right, all right. You have a good one.
You too. Bye.